What if one fighter plane could dominate skies across two oceans, built so differently that even veteran pilots thought it looked wrong? The Lockheed P-38 Lightning didn't just look unconventional, it broke every rule of aircraft design at the time. Two engines, twin tails, and a cockpit that sat in the middle like the sting of a wasp. It was fast, powerful, and intimidating, but that wasn't what made it terrifying. What made the P-38 truly dangerous was how it concentrated its firepower. Every bullet, every round, every blast from its 20mm cannon came straight down the center line. No convergence angles, no guesswork. When a Lightning pilot pulled the trigger, it was like pointing a laser in an era of scattershots, and that alone changed the air war. But here's the twist. When the P-38 first took flight, even Lockheed's own engineers weren't sure it would survive. Early tests were riddled with vibration issues, engine stalls, and aerodynamic quirks no one had seen before. Test pilots called it a beast with two hearts. It was the fastest fighter in the world on paper, but in the wrong hands it could turn deadly for its own pilot. Still, the Army Air Corps saw something others didn't. America needed a long-range, high-altitude fighter, something that could escort bombers deep into enemy territory and still dogfight on the return trip. The Lightning promised both, and once its flaws were tamed, that promise turned into fear for anyone on the other side of its guns. Across Europe, German pilots gave it a name that said it all: Der Gabelschwanz Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. In the Pacific, Japanese airmen learned to dread the glint of twin booms cutting through the sunlight. The P-38 didn't just outrun, outclimb, or outshoot its enemies. It outthought them, thanks to brilliant engineering and tactics that made full use of its design. But raw power alone wasn't enough. The Lightning's legend was forged not in theory, but in missions so daring they sounded impossible. And one of those missions, an operation that changed the course of the Pacific War, would prove just how deadly this machine could be. Because what happened next showed the world that the P-38 Lightning wasn't just another fighter, it was a hunter. When Lockheed engineers first rolled out the P-38 Lightning prototype in 1939, most of the aviation world didn't know what to make of it. It didn't look like a fighter, it looked like two planes glued together. But behind that strange silhouette was pure innovation. Chief designer Clarence Kelly Johnson and Hall Hibbard weren't trying to build something ordinary. They were chasing a fighter that could fly faster, higher, and farther than anything America had ever seen. To do that, they had to break almost every design convention of the 1930s. The twin-boom structure wasn't just for looks, it solved multiple problems at once. Each boom housed a turbo-supercharged Allison V1710 engine, giving the P-38 the kind of high-altitude performance that left single-engine fighters gasping for air. Those engines fed into counter-rotating propellers that canceled out torque, keeping the Lightning stable even when diving at terrifying speeds. In an age when pilots wrestled their aircraft to stay level, the P-38 practically sliced through the sky like a guided missile. But what really made it a nightmare for enemy pilots was its nose. While most fighters mounted their guns in the wings, forcing bullets to converge at a specific distance, the P-38's designers took a radical approach. All its firepower went into the nose. 4 50-caliber machine guns and a 20mm cannon were packed tightly together, firing perfectly straight ahead. That meant at any range, whatever was in the Lightning's sights was in danger. One burst could shred an enemy aircraft before it even knew it was targeted. There was no need to guess range or angle. Just point, fire, and watch the sky clear. Even the ammunition setup was clever. With different guns having different rates of fire, The Lightning's bursts created a storm of lead and explosive shells that seemed almost continuous to the human eye. Enemy pilots described being hit before they ever heard the guns. It wasn't brute force. It was precision, engineered into every bolt and bullet path. Still, this monster had a learning curve. Its speed and power came with quirks: compressibility at high speeds, tricky engine management, and the constant threat of overheating. Pilots had to earn their way into a Lightning. Those who did, though, discovered something incredible: a machine that could chase down almost anything in the sky. And it didn't take long before the P-38's speed and range were tested in one of the boldest missions of World War II, an operation so secret and daring it sounded like a movie script, but it was very real. April 18, 1943. Over the vast, empty Pacific, 18 P-38 Lightnings sliced through the clouds at treetop level. Their target wasn't a squadron or a convoy, it was a single man: Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor. U.S. codebreakers had cracked a Japanese message revealing exactly when and where he'd be flying for an inspection tour. But there was a catch. His flight path was so far from Allied bases that no fighter on Earth, except one, could make the round trip. That's where the P-38 came in. Its long range, twin engines, and reliability made it the only aircraft capable of pulling off what would become one of the most daring missions of World War II. The plan? A 1,000-mile flight from Guadalcanal, skimming just above the ocean to avoid radar detection, arriving at the precise minute Yamamoto's transport was expected to appear. One small navigation error, and the entire mission would collapse. As the Lightnings neared Bougainville Island, they climbed into attack position. The Japanese formation appeared ahead, 2 Mitsubishi bombers escorted by 0 fighters. In seconds, the calm Pacific morning erupted into chaos. Major John W. Mitchell led the strike, while Captain Thomas Lanphier and Lieutenant Rex Barber went straight for Yamamoto's plane. Lanphier rolled inverted, dove hard, and fired a burst that shredded the bomber's right engine. Barber's rounds tore through the fuselage. The G-4M Betty bomber spiraled into the jungle below, crashing in flames. Yamamoto, the man responsible for Pearl Harbor, was gone. The U.S. pilots turned for home, engines straining, fuel tanks nearly dry. They'd flown over 1,000 miles through enemy territory and returned with just enough gas to land. The mission had lasted nearly 5 hours, and only one fighter type in the world could have done it. The Lightning had just proven that range and firepower could change the course of a war. When word spread, the story sounded impossible. A group of fighters flying halfway across the Pacific, striking with surgical precision and vanishing back into the clouds. It was the moment the P-38 earned its mythic status. To the Allies, it was proof of American ingenuity. To Japan, it was a chilling message. Nowhere was safe. But the Yamamoto intercept was only the beginning. As the war dragged on, the Lightning became the scourge of the Pacific skies, and its pilots started rewriting the rules of air combat. After the Yamamoto mission, the Pacific skies belonged to the Lightning. Its twin booms weren't just a mechanical oddity anymore. They were a warning sign. Every Japanese pilot knew that silhouette meant trouble. Across the vast, unforgiving ocean, the P-38 became the perfect weapon, fast enough to chase, tough enough to come home on one engine, and deadly from the moment it appeared. Unlike Europe's compact battlefields, the Pacific demanded endurance. Missions stretched hundreds of miles over nothing but open water, and one engine failure in a single-engine fighter often meant never coming back. That's where the Lightning thrived. Its twin Allison engines gave pilots a safety net and a sense of fearlessness. They could push deeper, stay longer, and hit targets no one else could reach. But range was only half the story. The other half was the kill count. Two names still echo through aviation history: Major Richard Bong and Major Thomas Maguire. Both men flew P-38s, and both became the top-scoring American aces of the entire war. Bong racked up 40 aerial victories, Maguire 38, and almost every one of those kills came in a Lightning. Their opponents flew the agile Japanese Zeros, famous for tight turns and light frames. But the P-38 didn't need to outturn a Zero. It could outclimb it, outdive it, and hit harder from twice the distance. When a Lightning pilot opened fire, the sky exploded in a straight-line barrage that few enemy planes survived. Still, the Pacific wasn't kind to anyone. Tropical heat punished engines. Humidity jammed guns. Salt air corroded everything metal. Yet, with steady maintenance crews and pilots who learned to master the quirks, the P-38 turned those islands into stepping stones toward victory. From Guadalcanal to the Philippines, it escorted bombers, strafed airfields, and ambushed enemy formations before they even reached combat altitude. The Japanese eventually gave it a nickname that summed up how it felt to face one: Nihiko Eki Oni, the two-plane devil. In Europe, the Germans called it Der Gabelschwanz Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. Two enemies, two names, one meaning: fear. But while the P-38 dominated the Pacific, not every sky was so forgiving. When the same aircraft was sent to Europe, it found itself in colder air, faster opposition, and far less forgiving conditions, and its legend faced its first real test. While the P-38 Lightning reigned supreme under the Pacific sun, the cold skies of Europe told a different story. What had been the ultimate predator in tropical heat turned unpredictable in the frozen altitudes above Germany and France. Pilots who once called it unstoppable soon found themselves fighting not just the Luftwaffe, but the airplane itself. Europe's thin, frigid air exposed the Lightning's greatest weakness: its complex, twin-engine design. The turbo superchargers that gave it blistering speed at high altitude also made it temperamental. In extreme cold, those systems froze, oil thickened, and engines lost power at the worst possible moments. Pilots reported engine surges, compressor stalls, even spontaneous shutdowns mid-flight. Some missions ended before they began, ground crews wrestling with stubborn mechanics just to get the Lightnings airborne. Then there was the cockpit. The P-38's greenhouse canopy, perfect for visibility in the Pacific, turned into an icebox over Europe. Frost crept across the glass, oxygen froze in hoses, and pilots flew shivering, wrapped in flight jackets as temperatures plummeted to -40. It was like flying inside a freezer, one veteran recalled. If the enemy didn't get you, the cold might. And the enemy was waiting. The Luftwaffe's fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, were built for Europe's conditions. They climbed faster, turned sharper, and hit hard at medium altitudes, where the Lightning's high-altitude advantages mattered less. Allied pilots had to rely on boom and zoom tactics, diving in fast and breaking off before the Germans could react. It worked, sometimes, but the Lightning's sheer size and twin-boom profile made it hard to miss. The Germans dubbed it Der Gabelschwanz Teufel, the fork-tailed devil. It was a name born of respect and frustration, but also of recognition. When a P-38's guns connected, it was over in seconds. Despite these struggles, the Lightning still carved out vital roles in Europe. It escorted bombers deeper than any other Allied fighter early in the war, long before the P-51 Mustang took over. It flew photo recon missions that mapped enemy positions and directed bombing campaigns. Even when it wasn't the star dog fighter, The P-38 was indispensable, the workhorse that kept eyes in the sky and pressure on the enemy. Still, Europe proved that even a superplane had limits. Its firepower and speed meant nothing if it couldn't adapt to the battlefield around it. But the Lightning's story didn't end there, because the very traits that made it unpredictable in combat would soon make it one of the most versatile aircraft of the entire war. When engineers designed the P-38, they built it to fight. But war has a way of forcing machines to evolve, and the Lightning evolved better than almost any plane of its era. What started as a high-speed interceptor soon became the Swiss Army knife of the skies. Fighter, bomber escort, reconnaissance scout, and ground attacker rolled into one. The transformation began out of necessity. As the European theater demanded intelligence more than dogfights, Lockheed stripped the guns from the Lightning's nose and replaced them with cameras. These new versions, designated the F-4 and later the F-5, flew higher, faster, and deeper into enemy territory than most bombers could dream. They captured crisp, high-altitude photos of enemy fortifications, supply lines, and even secret installations. The pictures they brought back weren't just useful, they were decisive. Many of the Allied bombing raids over Europe were guided by images taken from a lone, unarmed P-38 gliding silently over enemy territory. But not every Lightning traded its guns for lenses. Others became precision strike aircraft, modified to carry bombs or rockets under their wings. In the Pacific, these versions devastated Japanese shipping, strafed airfields, and cracked open coastal fortifications before ground troops even landed. A single P-38 could unleash a storm of 50-caliber rounds, drop two 1,000-pound bombs, and still have the speed to vanish before enemy gunners even took aim. Pilots described it as a fighter that hit like a bomber and ran like a racer. It didn't stop there. The Lightning also became the backbone of long-range escort missions, guiding B-24 and B-25 bombers to distant islands and back. The bombers called them guardian angels, silent sentinels who could dive, strike, and climb back to altitude faster than any threat could follow. The P-38 wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was a strategy. That versatility gave it a new identity, less a single-purpose fighter, more a platform that could be anything the Allies needed. Few aircraft in history have pulled off that kind of transformation. By the war's final years, the Lightning had proven that innovation wasn't about perfection, it was about adaptation. But as the jets began to roar onto runways and the world moved toward a new era of flight, the Lightning's time in the spotlight began to fade. And with its retirement came debate. Was it truly the best fighter of its time, or just the most misunderstood? By the time World War II ended, the P-38 Lightning had carved its place into aviation legend. It had fought from the frozen skies of Europe to the humid clouds over the Pacific, claimed thousands of victories, and helped end a global war. More than 10,000 Lightnings rolled off the production line, an industrial marvel that showed how far American engineering could push piston-powered flight. And yet, as soon as peace arrived, the very traits that made it revolutionary began to age overnight. Jet engines had arrived. The new Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, built by the same company, made the Lightning look almost prehistoric. Within a few short years, most P-38s were pulled from service, scrapped, or left to rot on forgotten airfields. By 1949, the aircraft that once symbolized cutting-edge power was practically extinct. Still, for those who flew it, the Lightning wasn't just a plane, it was an attitude. Pilots swore by its stability, its raw speed, and the way it could still hold its own against any prop-driven rival. But history isn't unanimous. Some historians argue that the P-38 was a theater hero, brilliant in the Pacific, out of place in Europe. Others claim it was simply ahead of its time, a concept that anticipated the multi-role fighter decades before the term existed. Critics point to its complexity, its maintenance demands, its cold weather struggles. Supporters fire back that those same traits proved its genius. The price of innovation in a world still learning what air combat could be. And then there are the what-ifs. What if the Lightning had received better cold weather tuning? What if production had ramped faster? Or its high-altitude performance been refined earlier? Could it have replaced the Mustang as the Allies' go-to escort fighter? Those questions still spark debate among historians and aviation buffs, because the P-38 wasn't just a machine, it was a missed opportunity wrapped in brilliance. Today, only a handful survive. Some were pulled from jungles, deserts, or under layers of Arctic ice, like the famed Glacier Girl, a P-38 rescued from beneath Greenland's ice sheet after 50 years. When that plane took to the air again in 2002, its twin engines screamed like ghosts of the past, reminding the world of an era when pilots faced death with nothing but courage and aluminum. The P-38's story is more than blueprints and battles. It's a study in boldness. It outgunned, outranged, and outlasted expectations. But its real legacy lies in the question it left behind. How far can innovation go before the world is ready for it? In the end, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning wasn't just another fighter. It was a symbol of what happens when imagination outruns fear. It looked nothing like its peers, sounded like thunder, and hit like a storm. From the moment its twin engines roared to life, it changed what a fighter could be. It outgunned opponents with precision nose-mounted firepower, outranged them with twin-engine endurance, and outthought them with design choices decades ahead of their time. In the right hands, it was untouchable, a predator built for a sky that no one had yet mastered. But what made the P-38 truly special wasn't only its victories. It was how many roles it played and how many lives it shaped. It was the escort that brought bombers home, the spy that photographed secret bases, the hunter that struck from the sun. It carried America's greatest aces, downed the most feared admiral in the Pacific, and earned nicknames from two continents that all meant the same thing: fear and respect. Few aircraft have ever commanded that kind of universal awe. Even after it disappeared from frontline duty, the Lightning's DNA lived on. Lockheed learned lessons from its daring design, lessons about speed, power, and balance that would echo through generations of aircraft. You can trace its spirit in the F-80, in the F-104 Starfighter, and even in the stealth fighters that rule the skies today. Every time an aircraft designer dares to build something that looks impossible, they're following in the P-38's contrails. The Lightning's story is a reminder that greatness isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. It stumbled, it adapted, and it soared again. It faced enemies, weather, and doubt, yet always returned with new scars and new triumphs. In a war defined by mass production and attrition, the P-38 was personal, each one a reflection of the pilots who tamed it. So, when you see that fork-tailed silhouette glinting in an old photo or streaking across a modern air show sky, remember, this was the plane that outgunned its enemies, outflew its limits, and outlived its critics. It was the Lightning, loud, lethal, and legendary. And even though the wars it fought are long over, its echo still lingers, whispering through history. Innovation always starts with someone daring to build what shouldn't work, and proving everyone wrong.